All right, let's get up, let's dance, let's do this.
This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine.
Sing along.
This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine. Gonna let it shine, shine. Everybody, shine, shine. All around the world, yeah. Shine, shine. You know you want to. Shine,
Shine everywhere I go. Come on. I'm gonna let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Everywhere I go, yeah. I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine. Gonna let it shine, shine. Everybody singing, shine, shine. You know you want to
shine, shine.
all around the world.
Shine, shine.
Hey, repeat after me. When there's light in the soul,
When there's humming soul,
there is beauty in the person.
there is beauty in the person.
When there's beauty in the person,
When there's beauty in the person,
there is harmony in the home.
there is harmony in the home.
When there's harmony in the home,
When there's harmony in the home,
there is honor in the nation.
there is honor in the nation.
When there's honor in the nation,
When there's honor in the nation,
there is peace in the world.
no more living in fear.
Come on, everybody.
We're gonna let it shine. Oh yeah, no more living in fear. No, no. We're gonna let it shine. No more living in fear. Come on. We're gonna let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine. Gonna let it shine, shine. Everybody, shine, shine. Everybody, come on. Shine, shine. All around the world, yeah. Shine, shine. All my brothers and sisters. Shine, shine. Ooh. Shine, shine. Well, you know you want to. Shine, shine.
All around the world.
Shine, shine. Shine, shine. Shine, shine.
Come on, everybody.
Shine, shine. Feel it. Shine, shine.
Woo! Yeah.
Welcome.
Nice job. Welcome. We'd like to welcome you to our inaugural Saturday evening service. Thank you so much for coming. We're really excited that you guys took time out of your Saturday to come join us. So we'd like to also welcome those who are on live stream. Welcome. We appreciate you watching. So I'd like to invite you. You can take pictures and video and participate in social media with your cell phones. But if you wouldn't mind just silencing it, we'd appreciate that. And so I'd like to introduce you to our little music team here. This is Talia. She's our vocalist. We have Peppy. He is on vocals and guitar. And I'm Erin. I'm on vocals and piano. So, yeah. So what I'd like for you to do, now that you know us, if you guys would stand up and turn to each other and introduce yourselves to someone.
Welcome to our weekend announcements.
During the week, Unity has Spirit Nia movement classes that take place on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays from 9 to 10 a.m. It's $13 per class, or you can buy a 10 punch card for $100, and there's free childcare for that. We also have coming up the Nia 52 Moves Play Shop that's led by Rebecca and Jill, and it is $20 a person, and there is free childcare for that, and that's Saturday, September 7th. So please join us, and you can sign up for the 52 Moves out in the lobby today.
Well, it's Welcome Home weekend, which means the festivities have begun. Starting with our Saturday celebration service, hosted by Reverend Shad and Aaron of Groverland, which will now be an ongoing service every Saturday at 5 p.m. This weekend kicks off the beginning of their talk series, The Three Faces of God, based on the book Is Your God Big Enough, Close Enough, You Enough by Paul Smith. Moving on to Sunday morning, don't forget our contemplative service at 9 a.m. for an opportunity for deeper connection through meditation with singing bowls and chanting by Norma Groverland, along with an enlightening message shared by Reverend Jack Groverland. That experience will lead you perfectly into the 11 a.m. celebration service with Reverend Santisha, who will share with you a deep and heartfelt message surrounded by more uplifting and inspirational music. But Welcome Home weekend isn't over yet. Sunday at 12:30 will be an all-church potluck with an open house, Unity Garden Market, games for the kids, a bounce castle, and much more. Finally, happening on Monday at 6:45 p.m., there's still space available for the B4 Men's Book Club meeting over at the Rayback Collective, more specifically in the event space on the south side of the bar. If you happen to have any further questions about these or any other Unity events, please visit the information table in the lobby after the service.
Come on out, music team. All right, we are going to invite Spirit into this room right now with a song called Face of God. Hopefully you'll know it, but I'll feed you the lyrics because we didn't put them up for you because we want you to focus on Spirit, focus on sharing in the room. So as soon as you guys are ready, let's see here. Someone you love.
You are the face of God. I hold you in my heart. You are a part of me. You are the face of God. You are the face of God. I hold you in my heart. You are a part of me.
let's just take an opportunity for some prayer. Let's drop ourselves into that centered space behind the heart, allowing the mind to slow down, allowing the heart to slow down. We've gathered tonight with like purpose to become closer to the divine, closer to this thing we call God, to connect with each other, and by doing so, accomplish that task, becoming closer to the divine, closer to God. And we're grateful just by arriving and entering into this space, we've brought this presence with us. We've quickened spirit to move in and through the hearts and minds in each of every one of us. And we've created a blast of energy that sends out through this city, through this country, through all the leaders of this country and all the countries around the world. A blast of peace and love and harmony moving through their minds and their hearts right now. We're grateful that just by coming here into this space, we have done that right now. And so it is. Amen.
You are the face of God. I hold you in my heart. You are a part of me. You are the face of God. You are the face of God. I hold you in my heart. You are a part of me. You are the face of God. You are the face. You are the face of God. I hold you in my heart. In my heart. You are a part of me. You are the face of God. You are the face of God. I hold you in my heart. You are a part of me. The face of God. You are the face of God. I hold you in my heart. You are a part of me. You are the face of God.
Here we are. We did it. We arrived. We found our favorite spot to sit, which is perfectly equidistant from anyone being close to us. We got that perfect gap. If I gave you a yardstick, you probably couldn't touch anyone around you. That's how we roll. That's how we do things. Saturday service, very excited about this. I know Santisha was talking about this long before I was here. I was talking about Saturday service with Erna back in Las Vegas years before we were here. This is something that's been brewing for a long time, and we've done it. Here we are. I think that deserves a round of applause. If I'm not mistaken, I believe this is the first Saturday service ever here at Unity of Boulder. So that's an accomplishment. But that doesn't mean everything has changed. We're still going to start off with words of wisdom, because I like to start off with words of wisdom. So we're going to do that. Moving past the prayer, here we go. God is a circle whose center is everywhere and circumference is nowhere. Perfectly clear, right? Everyone got that? No problem. Well, one of the greatest human challenges that we have faced since we've arrived on this little spinning rock is to try and explain the divine, or to try and explain God. You see, from the very beginning, humans have experienced something greater than themselves, right? We see it in rock drawings that are thousands and thousands of years old. Humans experienced something greater than themselves, some sort of intelligence moving through things that was greater than their own. We sensed something that was working behind the scenes, if you will. And for a lot of us, that's the first way we experience God. We just know something's going on behind the scenes that we don't quite have a grasp on. Nature isn't explaining it all. There's something more going on there. And so we sense this movement through things going on. And naturally, as we sensed this presence, we had a desire to try to describe it to one another, right? We want to share in the commonality of this experience, so we're going to try to describe this to one another. We're describing what we're feeling, describing what we're seeing and experiencing. And at first, we probably did it through motion. We probably didn't have a lot of developed language at that time, so we did some gestures and some motion. And then we probably came into song. We started to use song as our language to describe this essence back and forth to each other. And then that probably transitioned into ceremony, which is sort of what we're doing tonight with this service, which is thousands and thousands a year old. So we use ceremony to translate that, what we're experiencing, into words, into expressions, so others could have that experience. And eventually we compiled descriptive words to help us relate the experience. And we have lots of descriptive words. I'm sure you can read all of those, that's fine. Lots of descriptive words to describe this experience. And for many, what we experienced was very personal, right? This was a very personal experience, very tangible for us. And so it was only a matter of time before we came up with names for this essence. And so here we have the various names from the Torah, from the Old Testament, from the New Testament, that came about through time as people tried to put a name onto this essence and to this experience they were having. And in Unity, it's important to recognize that we recognize there's a lot of other books and spiritual teachers and masters outside of the Bible, so we have to recognize there's a lot of other gods that were being described at this time as this was emerging around the world. So we have the various other gods of the other religions. Those are up here on this screen. I'm going to give you a second just to read through those. I don't want you to feel like we left any out, so they're all there. Okay, that should be enough time, so you've got that now. Let's move on. Now, the important takeaway from all of this is that all around the world, humanity was having this experience, this shared experience of an intelligent force moving in and through things, a force that was much grander than their own or anything else they had experienced anywhere else. And because of the massive geographical distance between us, right, you have to think about in those early days, massive, massive tracts of land between us, we were sort of in these little isolated small tribes and villages, having this experience, developing this language to explain it, these ceremonies to help explain it, with little to no contact with each other whatsoever. So this meant, and this is a very important point I want to get across, in our geographical isolation at that time, we each developed different descriptive words, different ideas, names and ceremonies, and for this one thing we experienced, we came up with all these thousands and thousands of different ways that we express them today. So I want you to get that point. We all had this initial impulse, this feeling, and spawning from that came this massive diversity and expression of this one thing, right? Sort of this big bang of spirituality starting at the very beginning and then spawned in all these different places because it was developing these little cells, these little pockets around the world that really didn't have connection to each other. So even though it was the same thing that we were all experiencing, all of us were relating it to it in different ways and coming up with such vast and different ways to express what we were feeling. Because basically, we couldn't compare notes. Think about that, right? You couldn't just walk over to the neighboring culture and go, all right, this is what we're experiencing. You guys having the same thing going on with you? What do you guys calling that? Maybe we should use that name as well. That sounds pretty good. We didn't have that going on, and if we had that going on, we probably would have had one more similar concept across the globe of what this experience is, but we got this diversity because we couldn't really share notes. So in one location, we came up with Great Spirit. That was one of the native names that we had here on this continent. And then over there, it was Yahweh, developing the word Yahweh, and then somewhere else it would be Brahma or Buddha, developing these names around there, and maybe there yonder, it was Gaia, or you might have come up with Zeus. All these different expressions coming out of this one source. Each of us developing our own relationship and culture around the same thing, under a different name, but still referencing the same thing. And before I go any further, I'm going to have to make one thing abundantly clear. And this is something I see constantly. Among all the various interpretations of what was being experienced in these times, experiencing this one intelligent presence, none of them were entirely right, and none of them were wrong. You follow me? Because of the infinite nature of what we are trying to describe, what we are trying to express, the infinite nature of this presence, we cannot say that any of these interpretations were correct or incorrect. You follow me still? It's too big to say that any one interpretation of what they're experiencing was correct or incorrect, because each of them was an interpretation, right? An interpretation of what they're experiencing. It was an interpretation of an aspect of the infinite at large in some way or another. So none of them fully encompassed the divine, and each of them had issues with how they were going about it, right? None of them were fully perfect. Everything had some issues. And we know this to be true first because wherever humans are involved, you have personal perception and you have ego involved, right? So as soon as we're involved, there's already a flaw right there because ego is involved. Second, we know this to be true because by the very nature of God itself, which is indescribable, any attempt to put God into words is ultimately going to come up short. It has to. As soon as you try to describe something indescribable, you're going to have to come up short. And this is a conundrum that many scholars and mystics and spiritual masters have recognized over the years. So much so that the great Chinese mystic Lao Tzu, put this into the first opening words of his writings, the Tao Te Ching, to clarify this point. So let's look at this. The very first thing he writes, the Tao, if you want to refer to the Tao as God, divine nature, whatever you want to call it, the Tao that can be spoken is not the eternal Tao. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. What is he fundamentally pointing out here is that just through the mere act of him putting his experience into words, he has misled the reader. Just by the very fact that he stopped to take his experience and try to put it into words, he has misled the reader. And he's so keen on it that he says, I'm going to tell you up front, this is what's happened. He starts off his writings with a caveat, which I think we should all do that. Right? It would be a lot safer if we all said, what I'm about to tell you is probably wrong. Right? No one can stick to anything to you after that. I'm rubber, you're glue sort of thing. This is really what he's saying. From this point forward, you must understand that none of this is accurate or can be due to the unexplainable nature of the topic. I think that should be at the front of every spiritual book. Far too many spiritual books talk like they have it figured out, instead of saying, this has been my experience, I hope it helps you in some way, but it's really just my perception of how things go down. And so this points to a problem from the very beginning that we had. You can't put God into words. That's a problem. And subsequently, therefore, you can't understand God through words. If you can't put God into words, you cannot understand God through words. But the issue is actually much bigger than that. I know you're thinking that's a bigger problem, but it's actually a bigger problem than that. As the Guru Paramahansa Yogananda puts it, first he says, what God is cannot be grasped by the human intellect, nor expressed in words. What we have here is Yogananda also supporting this idea that any name or word that is attributed to the divine will fall short and has to fall short. But he takes it even one step further than that. Trying to understand the divine with the intellect alone also will fall short and has to fall short. Words can't do it, and you can't do it with the mind alone. Now we have a problem. So does this mean that we give up talking about God altogether and using these words? We get rid of all the spiritual books, all the lectures and seminars, and anything that's trying to stimulate the intellect with the words to help us understand God? And the answer is yes, that is exactly what we need to do, as outlined in this famous how-to manual called Fahrenheit 451. I might be confused. Was that book for or against book burning? I was in high school when I read it. I wasn't sure which direction they were going. Anyway, we'll get back on track. I guess you'd have to know what that book's about to really get what I'm even joking about. They were burning books. Okay, we're moving on. So, no, obviously, we're not saying that we have to throw out anything that has words. We're not going to start burning books. We don't stop our efforts to explain God and share the essence of God with one another through words, because language is a huge part of our spiritual growth and experience. It's become our primary way that we're communicating to each other, at least on the surface. And so language is very important in how we use it. But it's also important to recognize in this process that no words that attempt to describe God are perfect. Too many people talk to me thinking that they know God and going to describe God, or that their particular book is the perfect encapsulation of all that is, which we now know is impossible. So the next time a person tells that to you, just say, no, that's impossible. Shad said so. No singular description of God is 100% accurate. It just can't be. God is infinitely vast. Therefore, the volume of words that it would require to describe God would be infinitely vast. So, then how do we move forward when we have this problem? Well, I'd like to start by giving you the rest of the quote from Paramahansa Yogananda. Start off, he said, "What God is cannot be grasped by the human intellect, nor expressed in words, but the immanent, transcendent conception of God is the most nearly correct. God as both immanent, right here and very close, and transcendent, beyond space and time." Which brings us back to our opening words of wisdom. God is a circle whose center is everywhere and circumference is nowhere. Interesting, right? Which concurrently means God is right here and God is beyond the furthest reaches of the imagination.
Where I am, God is. Where I stand, God is standing strong. Where I breathe, God is breathing life in and out and through as me. Where I see, God is. Where I dance, joyless my feet. Where I live, beauty's flowing free, in and out and through me, as me. Where I doubt, God is the faith in life is, truth is, God is.
What is God? How do we explain God? Can we explain God? Should we explain God? If we are to explain God, we need a more expanded concept of God. This is what was rattling through the minds of the early church leaders. I'm pretending anyway. Their concept of God was growing and evolving, but their definition of God was still stuck in the past. Something new and more expanded was emerging. So the series we're covering is based on this book, Is Your God Big Enough, Close Enough, You Enough, by Paul Smith. And this is our first quote from him. This is what he says. In the 4th and 5th centuries, church leaders formally recognized an emerging pattern at the time about God that was called God in 3 persons. So up until that time, it was just pretty straightforward. We had this God in the cloud concept. But there was this rumbling taking place, and people were starting to say, no, there's more to God than this. There's more to God than this. So they were starting to come up with the concept of God in 3 persons. So here we are just a few hundred years after the departure of Jesus, from the scene. Christianity is still fairly young and struggling to find its identity in the world. It's struggling to find its identity with Judaism, away from Judaism. Are they intertwined? Are they 2 different things? And we're talking about the same time as the First Council of Nicaea. If you're familiar with that, this is the gathering of religious elite that came together to debate about what Christianity and the Bible are and what they are not. They're trying to clarify, what are we, what do we stand for, and what are we not, and what do we stand against? And in this time, a new concept of God is beginning to emerge from a singular idea or personification of God into that of a threefold expression of God. So he goes on to say, they worked out a complicated version of it that went something like, God is one being made up of 3 distinct persons who exist in equal essence and eternal communion as Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Does anyone know what the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit is called? Steve's the only one that raised his hand. Steve, do you have the answer? And he was almost in the front row too, just like in school. Good job, Steve. The Trinity. So for some, when they hear the Trinity, they picture this. When I hear Trinity, I picture this. Some of you know what that is. That's good. That's Trinity from The Matrix. A far cooler Trinity than this one, I think. But anyway. Trinity from the movie The Matrix, which, as far as I'm concerned, is the greatest spiritual film ever written. But that is just my own very biased opinion, my humble, biased opinion. Anyway, so the Trinity is born and begins a new direction for the understanding of God. So we're starting to have this 3 spaced out concept of God. And I see this as a good thing, because our relationship to God is becoming more personal and expanded. We're starting to have a broader picture of God. Before this point, God was a very distant dictator imposing his will upon us. But now we begin to see God as this more expansive character, one that expresses and moves among us, right? It's come a little bit closer to us. Now there is this direct contact with God by way of this physical form in Jesus, as they put it, and the ethereal form in the Holy Spirit. So now we're getting some direct contact with God. Of course, this new evolving concept is not perfect either. It has a long way to go. But I believe it was an evolution that we need to go through, a great evolution in understanding, a necessary evolution in understanding in order to bring us closer to the true nature and vastness of the divine. But it is flawed in many ways. For one, it is really hard to understand and rationalize or even find support for the Trinity in the Bible. People have spent thousands of years trying to rationalize this concept in the Bible. And so Paul speaks to this in his book. He says, "For centuries, theologians have pondered about what this Trinity means. A frustrated theologian was once reported to have said, 'You must believe in the Trinity to be called orthodox, but if you try to define it, you'll be called a heretic.' Another jokingly said that St. Augustine stated that anyone who denies the Trinity loses their salvation, but anyone who tries to understand it loses their mind." That's called a rock in a hard place right there. So they had this emerging concept, but they really could not support it. They could not explain it. They really didn't understand it, even though they were still teaching it and pushing it and have been for literally thousands of years, right? It still holds true today, but people still struggle to explain it and justify it from actual roots in the Bible. And the other and far more impactful reason that this concept is flawed is that it is still physically separates us from God. It separates us from the divine. And Paul speaks to this as well. It became a picture of God of three internal relationships that leave us out. Father, Son, and Spirit are having a great time loving one another, and we get to watch and be grateful. We're left out. We don't get to come play with God's toys. So the Trinity is a 1,600-year-old concept of God that needed to evolve. And Paul Smith, in his book, Is Your God Big Enough, Close Enough, You Enough, looks at the Trinity as a first step to moving forward. But that it is time to take the next step. It's time for the next step in this evolution. So Paul Smith introduces us to what he calls the expanded Trinity, or the three faces of God. The initial Trinity was God broken into three separate things. That's very important. God broken into three separate things. That was the original Trinity: Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. With Paul Smith's expanded Trinity, God is not broken into three separate things, but God is recognized as three different states of being. Does that sound a little more comfortable to you? It should. Which he categorizes as the infinite, the intimate, and the inner faces of God, with three different ways of relating to this presence, which, as it turns out, does reflect and align with the God in the Bible and the God that Jesus was teaching us about. Jesus spoke about God, Jesus spoke to God, and Jesus spoke at times as God, which is very confusing for most Christians or people reading the Bible, that he could speak about God, to God, and as God, all as the same entity. So, and the amazing thing is that this was not specific to Jesus or left just for Jesus. His message was down through us that we too could be doing the same thing, following these tools and this path that he laid before us. We too could talk about God, we could talk to God, we could eventually talk as God. But don't jump to that third step too quick. I saw a lot of you getting very excited to talk on behalf of God. Just slow down. There's a process. So this is going to be our focus in the coming weeks as we progress through this book and this concept that he is presenting for us. Along the way, we're also going to compare and contrast it to what other spiritual masters are saying and what maybe some modern articles have to add to this topic. And the reason I feel that this topic is important is because for many people, this is a huge point of confusion in Unity. There's probably some of you out there, you may not be willing to admit it, but for people new to Unity, this is a huge point of confusion for them. And believe it or not, for people that have been in Unity a really long time, it's still a huge point of confusion for them. Quite often, ministers are asked, how do we pray in Unity? If we don't believe in a God out there, what are we praying to? It's a valid question. Or, why does Unity teach from the Bible when we don't agree with the traditional Christian concept of God? Some have asked, does Unity believe Jesus was the Son of God? Do we believe in the Holy Trinity? These questions, and many more, create a lot of confusion for us as we're trying to figure out our place in the world, especially if you're just starting out in Unity. So we are going to answer these questions in this series. And the other reason I think this topic is important is that it helps to break down the walls between the various interpretations of God out there. Paul Smith is presenting an opportunity for us to say all of them are okay and all of them are correct. To break down this concept that my interpretation and my way of accessing the divine is actually the most correct and the best one. We can actually say, you know what? The divine, God is so vast, there can't be a wrong way to access the divine. So we start to heal some of these barriers that we've put between us that are out there. And I believe this concept also does a very good job of helping people rationalize and heal the religion of their upbringing. A lot of people have a hard time bridging that gap between the religion they were raised with and then unity where they stand today. But this series does a brilliant job of helping to bridge that gap and to bring it to terms and heal all of it, as all of it was okay. All of it was a process to bring me where I am today, and none of it is to be deemed as bad. And I will make this guarantee to you right now, and I'm not joking about this. At the end of this talk series, if you don't feel like you got your money's worth, I will give you a full refund on all the cookies and tea you drank in the fellowship hall. Some of you are trying to figure out the math on that. And that is the truth as I experience it. We're going to move into a time of silence. Thank you. We're going to move into a time of silence, which the film was originally called meditation. So if you're not familiar with this process, just begin by taking yourself into a quiet space and become introspective.
In the silence there is peace. In the silence there is unspoken joy. In the silence there's release from a world filled with chaos and noise. I awake to these precious moments when I hear all that could never be said, and right here in this holy silence I find God. I find myself.
So we allow the music, the breath, to center us into this body, into this presence, to become perfectly still, which we so rarely do. Even in our sleep, our eyes flutter, we toss and turn, we breathe deep. But sometimes it's healthy just to slow down enough to be still right where you are, to be calm, to begin to open to that presence, which is so vast, so amazing. We don't have to try to rationalize it. We don't need the perfect words. We don't have to prove it to one another. We don't have to convince anyone that our concept is the right one. We're allowed to simply be. In a world that's constantly trying to prove itself, we don't have to be there. We're allowed to simply be. To rest in the knowing that everything's okay. That all will work itself out. I don't have to have the perfect plan. I'm allowed to let go of outcomes. I truly am allowed to have peace in this life, in this existence, which, as it turns out, is my true nature. And so I rest in this stillness. Allow that sense of gratitude to wash over me, that my life is as blessed as it currently is, and only getting better. And so it is. Amen. Okay, welcome back. Glad you made it. So this is normally the time in the service where we would take an offering, where we would pass the plate and do that sort of thing. But for the Saturday evening service, we're going to try something a little different. And many people have told me I'm crazy for doing this. We don't feel like you should feel like you've been guilted or that you've been pressured into giving to contribute to this organization or to this experience. Rather, we want to ignite your spirit to inspire that giving nature within you to do what comes naturally. I don't have to convince you to give. If I can ignite that giving spirit within you, you will naturally do what you've been called to do. So we will go forward on faith that you will feel ignited by this experience and will eventually feel part of this experience and take ownership in this experience. And when you take ownership, you will be compelled to give accordingly. And that will just be a natural process that unfolds. So we have many convenient ways for you to be able to do that when you're ready. So you can text the word give to this phone number, and it'll help you sign up so that you can text your amount each time to that number. We have a recurring donation station out there if you want to sign up for recurring giving. We have dip jars, which you can slide your credit card into, which is outside by the exit doors. You can give online at unityofboulder.com, and we now have an app called Easy Tithe. You can download this app, and you can give money through there. You can track your giving through there. And that's the same app that is attached to the Text to Give platform. So if you're texting to give, it'll track it through the Easy Tithe app as well. Very convenient, yes? I lost all of you all of a sudden. Yes, thank you. Very convenient. And of course, we can take cash or checks. We actually have boxes on the walls next to the door as you exit there that you can stick cash or check into and give in that way. I know that early on when I joined Unity as my own independent person heading out into the world, it took me a little bit of time. Just like when you're dating someone, they don't expect you to pick up the check right away. But when you are ready and when you take ownership and this becomes a part of your life and this is part of your organization, you'll feel like it's time. You'll know it's ready to do that. So also part of the Saturday evening service is that we wanted to add something we're calling the Spotlight section of our service, where we're going to spotlight noteworthy people. We're going to spotlight places and opportunities in the Boulder area that we feel you might want to be getting engaged with. And it just so happens that this week's spotlight is an opportunity right here. actually looking for volunteers and help in all aspects of this service. And as you can see, there's an empty drum set sitting here. In the back of the room, there's a camera riser with no camera person behind it. And there's a lot of spaces we need filled, and we're going to make that happen because we know that people are going to rise up and want to join and be a part of this experience. Because I know I'm enjoying it, and I hope you guys are as well. All right, we get to close out with this beautiful person, Joshua, sharing his music with us.
Thank you, Shad. This song is called Living in the Moment. It's by Jason Mraz. If this life is one act, why do we lay all these traps? We put them right in our path when we just wanna be free. I will not waste my days making up all kinds of ways to worry about all the things that will not happen to me. And so I just let go of what I know I don't know, and I know I only do this by living in the moment, living my life easy and breezy, with peace in my mind, got peace in my heart, got peace in my soul. Wherever I'm going, I'm already home, living in the moment. I'm letting myself off the hook for things I've done. I let my past go past, and now I'm having more fun. I'm letting go of myself. I'm letting go of the words that do not make me strong. And I believe this way can feel the same for everyone. And if I fall asleep, I know you'll be the one who'll always remind me to living in a moment, living my life easy and breezy, with peace in my mind, got peace in my heart, got peace in my soul. Wherever I'm going, I'm already home. Oh, I can't walk through life facing backwards. I have tried more than once to just make sure, and I was denied the truth that I was searching for. I spun around and heard no more. By living in the moment, living my life easy and breezy, with peace on my mind. I got peace in my heart, got peace in my soul. Wherever I'm going, I'm already home, living in the moment. Thank you.
Guys got some pipes. That's impressive. All right, well, thank you all for coming. We are going to have some tea and cookies and snacks over there on the dance floor in the fellowship area, so I invite you to come over and fellowship and do that. Come together. Let's not just run out and go about our lives. Let's take some time to actually share in each other's presence and say hello and be human. How's that sound? Some of you are thinking, I got to sneak out as quickly as possible. All right, so we do not have CDs or DVDs of this service available because we're going to have it available on Facebook, and it's on our website, and it's on YouTube. So if you want to watch it again or be a part of that, it's on all those resources for you to go see for free. So take part of that. And yeah, I think we're going to rock out to one last tune.
Do you want to sing with us, Shad?
No.